I'm going to be talking about the impact of misinformation on individuals with autism and what we can do to combat it. So the key points I'll be going over is the lack of awareness, misinformation, stereotypes, lack of resources, and in closing, what can we do? Many people still don't know what autism is or understand that it is a spectrum. So I'm sure we've all been asked, what is autism, when we talk about what we do? And when we start to really dive deep into autism and what it is, people are often very surprised. They don't understand that it is a spectrum. People will know one person with autism, like my younger brother, people will know him and they will think that that is what autism is, and they don't understand that it is a much bigger picture than that. A study done on college students about autism and how they see it, their perception of it was that people with autism don't understand emotions, that they can't be social, or also that stereotype that they're very smart, which seems positive, but it is actually negative because it invalidates people with autism who do struggle. Or their image often involves popular characters from television who are perceived to have autism. And this is where a lot of the more common stereotypes develop. And these carry over into childcare and education facilities, even into our government. I went to a child development conference and the key speaker there that talked about autism consistently compared it to Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. That was her basis on autism, and she kept going back to that and making blanket statements that, again, people with autism don't understand emotions, they don't have an imagination, and they have rigid routines, which yes, a lot of them do have rigid routines, and many do struggle with emotions, but that's not every child or adult.
It's very interesting you say that, because I feel like a lot of people get their perception from like movies and TV shows, and they're always very consistent with how they portray autism.
It's always that savant syndrome type of autism rather than like actually showing the whole spectrum.
And that's how that's what they know.
Is labeling it as just one specific thing is why like so like finite with like, oh, you have autism, then you have this, and this. It's like, no.
I hear a lot like, I think this kid has autism because they're so smart, and yes, our kiddos are very smart, but it ends up being harmful because people with profound autism are just very underrepresented.
Or take one stereotype, like lining up vehicles, like just because a neurotypical kiddo could be lining it up as if they're in a parking lot, and then people will be like, do you think they have autism? They're lining up their trucks. Like, no, like what if they're putting it into parking spots? Like, just interesting.
People very much pigeonhole it. It's like, this is what autism is, and it just leads to a lot of harm. Like, you'd think saying, oh, they're so smart wouldn't be harmful, but it does very much invalidate kiddos who may struggle a lot more. And I keep saying kiddos, but it's people as a whole with autism, because adults absolutely have autism. The misinformation, it is everywhere. You find it on every type of social media, news outlets, in schools, everywhere. Because social media, they're gonna prioritize views and profit over stopping the spread of misinformation. So if some popular TikToker is saying like, if you do this, you have autism, if you do this, you have autism, they're gonna look at all those likes it has, and they're gonna think, oh, this must be true because so many people are following this person, so they must know what they're talking about. One of TikTok's most popular videos about autism is a girl who likes to stir her ice cream and eat it soft, and she said that was a sign of autism. And that is one of the most popular TikToks about autism that is out there. And they have claimed to take action to limit misinformation, however, it has yet to show any success. And the misinformation on social media, it's an overgeneralization of symptoms. So someone will say like, oh, I bounce my knee a lot, I have ADHD, or I get nervous in these social situations, I have autism, like things that could apply to someone with autism or another developmental disability, but it's just so vague that you're gonna have people thinking like, oh, I do that, I must have autism, or I must have this other disability. and yeah, claiming common behaviors, traits, are signs of autism. They say like frequent blinking or toe walking, things that people often do that maybe could be related, but it likely is not. The myths such as vaccines cause autism, that is again on the rise, and it's still being said consistently. There are a lot of false claims about what causes autism out there, but there really is no found cause. The closest would be genetic, but that's still yet to be proven. Ways to avoid or cure autism: there is no cure for autism, and there's no certain way to avoid it, yet there is a lot of information out there claiming that they have the knowledge of how to avoid or cure it. And then making false claims about different treatments or therapies. So a lot of what we see is the negative misinformation about ABA out there, that it tries to stop kids from stimming, that we try to cure their autism, that we try to force them to be quote unquote normal, and that we stop them from being themselves. And this can lead to people like foregoing treatment or just not doing things to help their child because they have this misinformation that makes the treatments and therapies that their child may need or the diagnosis they may need seem just negative and lead to people attacking parents and claiming that they neglect or abuse their child with autism just because they're doing their best to care for them in the best way they know how. Did you guys have anything you'd like to add about that negative stigma on ABA? Because I feel we've all seen it and we all have some thoughts on that.
I don't know if you're gonna like jump into this at all, but that's like one of the main reasons, like in our field, like we really pride ourselves in remaining current with current research, and like even with like Knowledge Night, and eventually the RVTs are gonna do CEUs, like continuing ed, just to remain current and remain up to date with the research that is being done, because these questions from parents are going to happen, and from the public when you get asked questions about what cures autism, or like, does my kid have autism because he does XYZ, and just being able to professionally explain yourself and like have the research to back up what you guys are saying. And so that's one of the big reasons that we want to stay current with research, because I mean, I've had parents come to me telling me that olive oil cures autism, so they would send peanut butter and jelly doused in olive oil because it cured autism on the internet, or ground therapy, like bringing their kid outside barefoot and with grass or with shorts to sit on the grass and do ground therapy. And then I asked them, okay, well, does she do this for you at home? We can't get her to sit in the grass. Like, one, like, I'm not gonna prioritize stuff that's not evidence-based or research-driven. And two, it's not a socially significant skill. There is not a cure for autism, but when we word it that way, we can't tell parents there is no cure. We have to back up what we can do and what is research-driven, because that can deteriorate a relationship with a parent and stuff like that. Anything to add to that? Sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there.
I would say that people have told me in the past, like, to cure Easton's autism is to do like the stem cell therapies and stuff and go down to, I don't know, Mexico, Costa Rica, wherever they do that. So that's
Not
like
even in the
another.
States?
No, because it's not like medically necessity, and
It's really scary.
it's very experimental.
And you've experienced a lot of like lash out of two parents with autism.
Yeah, as a parent you do at times, being with, I don't even know, like, so a parent can't have a perception of autism, essentially. It's what gets portrayed on social media. So when you try to describe your child with autism, you'll get a lot of negative comments about you don't have a perception on autism because you don't have autism. You don't have a voice, your voice don't matter, things like that.
Or if you express that you're struggling with your child, then
Yep.
oh, you don't love your child, you're not, or you want to help treat them so they can achieve more independence. It's you're not accepting them for who they are, and you're trying to change them or make them normal, and it's very disheartening to see. And it just seems like, not seems, but people really struggle to do legitimate research. Like, since social media is just always so in your face, that becomes the way you research things, is you look it up on social media, or you type it in once and then suddenly you're getting a bunch of Instagram reels or TikToks about it, and that's where your knowledge comes from, and it's not reliable, and it's very harmful to not just individuals with autism, but their families and all around the community.
It makes parents not want to like speak up about it and be an advocate. So.
I also feel like in the past, like with people with developmental disabilities, some like autism or other ones, are just like 30, 40 years ago, what was happening was not okay. People have that negative stigma associated with today when it's just not the same, but I don't think people really grasp that.
They don't realize that we grow, and with new research and new knowledge, like, we grow, and how we address things improves, and trauma-informed care comes about, and child-led teaching comes into play, and it just makes all that much of a difference. Thank you guys. I love the contributing. Self-diagnosis, that is also a thing that is rising so much. And again, it's a lot of social media based. It goes into, people saying, oh, if you have this, you have autism. If you do this common thing that a lot of people do, you have autism. And the self-diagnosis, you should never use the internet. You should never self-diagnose yourself. You can use the things you see online. If it brings concerns in yourself, you can say, you can go to a professional and say, I feel that there may be something wrong. I feel like I might have autism. And seek them out. But in this self-diagnosis area on social media, it is also saying that doctors don't know, and that if a doctor tells you you don't have autism, they're wrong. If they tell you you have it, they're wrong. No matter what they tell you when you go in, they're wrong, and that you should be relying more on the web-based research, which again is not reliable and often doesn't consist of legitimate research.
It's really sad. I learned at my Mary Kay conference that people are 80% more likely to buy a product from the internet, from someone explaining it, more so than relying what's on the actual label. So like, it could say that there's like super glue in the label, but if Alexis is on TikTok and it looks great on her skin and we don't even know if it's actually even the product she's using, people are 80% more likely to buy it based on that. Like, that's just like really sad, like with how social media has such an impact.
Yep. All those influencers. Yep.
And people will just look at the likes and the follows, and they'll be like, oh, they have a lot of likes, oh, they have a lot of follows. Well,
it must work.
It must be true. It must be right. So how this leads to barriers or issues with people with autism, they may not receive the diagnosis or the treatment they need based on, parents finding like, oh, ABA causes trauma, or it'd be better if my child had holistic treatments or things like that, which obviously are not the route you should take. Schools are not equipped to teach or support, which we've seen that they really struggle to understand how to meet these children's needs. Older teens and adults seeking diagnosis may have a harder time being taken seriously due to the mass self-diagnosis, because psychiatrists have to be a lot more on the fence, because people will come in and just say, I have this and this and this and this, because they saw it online and they don't actually have these symptoms, and they don't want to be misdiagnosing their patients. And people with profound autism continue to be underrepresented. A lot of I keep referencing TikTok, but a lot of those TikTok pages, they're talking about very high functioning autism, and they do end up invalidating people with profound autism that struggle a lot more than they do. And they're not realizing that for a lot of people with profound autism, their family, their parents, those are the ones that advocate for them. And yet they're shutting down those voices.
And say with profound autism on the spectrum, about 24 to 25% on the spectrum have profound autism, but yet only 2 to 3% of all government based research is paid for profound autism. So that tells you how misrepresented they are and understudied.
So what can we do? For this, really a lot of it is just to advocate and to speak out when you see this kind of stuff going on. And it's very hard. Like when I was at that conference, it was very hard for me to raise my hand and say, hey, not all people with autism are like that. And my heart was pounding, but something needed to be said. And she just kind of gave me some side eye and kept prattling on. But I mean, maybe it made somebody in there think twice about the information she was spreading, because it wasn't accurate. I won't say her intentions were poor, but she wasn't really qualified. Yeah. And in our field, I know it's tough to think, about what we need to be doing outside of work, because it's nice to just go to work and then be done. But for our kiddos, we really need to be ready to speak up and stand up for them, even outside of work, and try to help promote education and just do our best to teach people about autism and use the things we learn here to just spread awareness in the community. And I know Darcy's let me talk at Castlewood, to talk to the kiddos, and it really does start young. I think that was really wonderful to see when I was talking to them about autism, how they just wanted to learn more and they just wanted to find out how to be kind. And I think it really does start there, and I know you guys would definitely love to support us in doing anything like that to help make our community a kinder and more accepting place. And I know Darcy, you said you want to do something for adults in their living situations. It was
down the road I do, where we have adults in apartments and stuff, where you have some neurotypical people live with adults with autism. And then neurotypical people would get cheaper rent or free rent, and then they would also teach these adults how to live on their own. And then it'd be just a gradual fade program of that.
That's awesome, because the lack of awareness really just leads to us not providing a lot of the resources that adults with autism need, because they're very underrepresented.
Mm-hmm. Adults especially.
And Darcy's been doing a lot at the state level too, of helping advocate and change laws and doing all of the cool big girl things.
It's very scary actually, because you testify in front of committees and people in suits that stare at you and
And it's no different than before we started talking about public speaking and stuff. It's nerve-wracking at first, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. So it's just like advocating for autism. If you are a part of a group or in front of a crowd, the more you talk about it, the more fluent you become, the more confident you become, and the more likely you are going to bring up those different topics and advocate in different ways.
And it is a hard conversation. When people get stuck in those beliefs or those ways, but this person said vaccines cause autism, but this person says this about autism, and you might tell them hey, you're wrong, and just having those hard conversations.
And it's really easy to be able to have the references or the data or the research to back up what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
There's been many times where I have journal articles saved in a file on my phone, and I have sent it to people. It seems weird, but I'm validating to you the information I'm giving you. It's not just something I'm pulling out of my ears.
Because there's you talk a lot about all the negative or bad side of social media, but there are good advocators out there. They're just
Yeah.
not as
Yeah.
Yeah.
prevalent. Or they're not what people, the general public, I don't think, sees, because they don't get like the most. They get
The
like
algorithms.
Yeah.
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 Honestly,
it's-
the one I follow, I share quite a bit, is Ellen, I can't think of her last name. Her son Charlie has autism. And she also has a younger son that also has autism, and they're completely different. Like, one's very high functioning. Autism is like 3 grades above his peers, and then Charlie has a profound autism. She also has autism as well too, so she gets roasted on social media constantly, and she's one of them that constantly sticks up and talks about profound autism, and like her voice matters as a parent. And then you see this little snowball effect that other parents are like speaking up and commenting on there, saying like thank you and all these things. So
And there's a lot of opportunities to advocate for the autism population too. Like there's multiple, especially in the summer, multiple autism walks or autism awareness walks. Like there's one in Sioux Falls, June 7th. There's many up in the cities. Like there's a lot of opportunities, even if you're not going there to have like a booth or like have intentions to talk in front of a group of people. Just your presence being there is you saying like, I'm here, I'm advocating for people with autism, like, and you meet a lot of really cool people. Like I have a picture in my office hanging up from a 18-year-old girl who had autism, and she wrote a book, and I bought one of her pictures. Like it's really cool to hear their stories there too.
Or like my sister and her husband doing like autism awareness nights for like racing.
Mm-hmm.
we're
So, like, we're
sponsoring that.
sponsoring one here. She's doing another one in Aberdeen.
Oh, I didn't know.
That's really cool.
Might have to go to that one too, just to support them.
The little things matter.
And just think about how much your sister and your brother-in-law is like
They were
changing
very
too. Do you know what I mean?
like my family didn't have as much knowledge as we have about autism.
And I know they've been connecting with other families
Yeah.
in the racing world that have autism as well too. So it's just cool to watch, like, you know.
And just the spread of information.
Yep.
Because it's more prevalent than people
And
acknowledge.
I have a family in Pipestone that the mom, when the clinic closed, the mom started building the Blessing Facebook page, and she's now up to like 50 some members. Well, kids with disabilities and with autism are coming to her events, and they have never been able to bring their kid to events. But since it's a group of people that they can be vulnerable with because they're all in a very similar situation, and it's all of their kids, they bring their neurotypical children and their kids with disabilities, and they're all just there for each other. And like these kids are being exposed to going to outings like bowling or a gymnastics gym or a gym or swimming, where it's shut down to the public, but they're able to be vulnerable and like have those opportunities to learn from each other as families. And that's another really cool thing. But it really just takes one person, and it can be anyone.
And it really, like, it does snowball, and like it just, because people are still discriminated against when it comes to like employment too. My younger brother lost his job because they just didn't feel like, they said that there was like budget cuts, but they just were like, I don't know how to work with somebody with autism. It was a little discriminatory, and since then he's had such a hard time finding a job because people just don't want to, they don't know how to work with somebody with autism.
Have him come here. He can work for me.
I would love that.
He can I'd find something for him to do. Between cleaning and making copies or some computer work, whatever he wants.
He's a very good employee. He wants to do anything he can do where he can put in his headphones and just work, and he will work all day as long as he
need
doesn't have
somebody
to
like-
talk to people.
I need someone like that. Yeah.
Anything else anybody would like to add?
I just feel like getting discriminated with. I feel like it's just like I don't know. There's people who take like the term autism and just take it as like a negative label essentially, and it just
It is still
I just
very much seen.
feel like that's
in negative
a
ways.
large portion of like the problem is not that there's a problem, but like with just exposing it to the general population. It's like, oh, like there's certain like words that there's people hear once and they don't even like give it a second. I was like, oh, they'll associate
stigma.
that like this gives a negative connotation. It's just like, why?
Yeah.
Why though?
Like Kyle struggled, I see where you're coming from. So Kyle struggled to even accept like Easton's autism diagnosis for like a year. Just because like he had like farmers have these very typical view on like
What
special
their
needs.
son's gonna be and like the negative.
Yeah, and special needs kids and things like that, especially very, very rural, like South Dakota. We're still like, I feel like 30 years behind the times at times. Like talking to Kyle's grandpa even, like he doesn't understand mental health or like autism or any of those things. He just thinks sometimes like Easton just stuck up and refuses to do things and like all this stuff. So like that is even harder, especially in rural South Dakota, you know.
I have a really cool story from yesterday. I was at a parent training with a client's family, and when I first started introducing Project Impact, which is a parent training curriculum, I was asking the dad what his goals are and like how he responds to the behaviors and all of this, and he's like, I'm not going to treat my son any different than I treat my daughter. Like my parenting is going to remain the same across both my kids. Like I'm not changing my ways. And I was like, okay, like, well, I can work with that. So I started talking about autism and Project Impact and like the curriculum itself. At the end, his goal changed to he wants to learn how to be more patient, learn how to communicate, and not lose his cool when screaming behavior starts. And like, I just thought it was cool because at the beginning it was, I'm doing the same thing for my son that I do for my daughter. And at the end it was, how can I respond to my son's behaviors differently to get on his level? And like, that's another thing is when people come at us with these like negative connotations almost of like, and you're like, whoa, like get to know the reason why, like get under the reasoning why we have that view or why they have that view, and then be able to communicate softly with them, like a soft communication style, instead of like, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Understand where they're coming from, put yourself in their shoes, and then at the end of the conversation, you never know, it might take a 180 turn and they're constantly, or then they're on your side. It's like, okay, how can I advocate? How can I become more patient? How can I learn more? Who can I learn from?
It just takes one good conversation.
I thought that was pretty cool though.
That is very cool.
I left almost crying. I was like, oh my gosh.